Hello, everyone, and welcome to my labyrinth. And if you're on YouTube, welcome to my other labyrinth. Or maybe it's like my kind of chaotic, unfiltered labyrinth. So, anyway, I had this idea for a second channel. Let's say in a dream. That's kind of a lie. Or it's an unformulated lie or an unformulated truth. But honestly, it's more because I have trouble kind of sticking to just one thing. I have a lot of thoughts, and some of them I'm just not super attached to, but also haven't fully formulated. But I need to put them out there and see what happens. And this is my little experiment for that. I've realized I do this all the time in kind of non-digital life, say like talking about stuff as a way to work through my own thoughts, testing ideas out loud, seeing how they feel when you say them, I guess. I hope that makes sense. But anyway, I figured, why not do that on here in a digital form and make it super public and stuff and say stuff that I can never come back from. It just seems like a really healthy way to do it. But basically, I can't stop talking, and it's just part of my kind of process to eventually get to the things I actually want to say. Anyway, this channel will be that process in real time, while my other one can be the more polished, condensed version. Anyway, there will be lots of points made in this episode too. I'm just kind of giving that background because it kind of fits in the context. Yeah, but like I said, that one will be more formulated, can do whatever clarity I stumble into, blah, blah, blah. But for a bit of context, I watched this JREG video that had some neat graphs, but honestly, my brain eats up visual aids like that, and it helped me visualize. It kind of helped me wrap my head around the schizo versus tism brain stuff. And I really liked it because I really related to it, really related to how my brain works as well. But basically, is it psychologically accurate? I don't know. I don't really care. But probably not entirely. But it makes sense in my brain, so I'm going to present it here. So I'm running with it. Anyway, I've come up with my own kind of interpretation, which you are also free to disagree with or even despise. But it kind of clicked for me. It made me realize I wanted a place where I didn't have to overthink every single word I say. A space where I can throw kind of paint at a wall, metaphorically speaking. But somewhere I can kind of try to connect the dots in different areas of thought. Like, kind of like it's that Always Sunny meme where Charlie got his kind of conspiracy board and looks like a total madman. Kind of like that, but in real life or something. Basically, I want to embrace those more kind of schizoid leanings here, and maybe, just maybe, the stuff that lights little light bulb in my head will move from unstructured chaos to something more coherent and land on my other channel, which is going to be more tismed, I guess, if you will. And this one's for the more lateral thinking. The other will be more vertical thinking, And if you're listening on the pod, congrats. You get the whole thing all the time, everywhere, all at once, all of the time, a little bit of everything all the time. Just less of my face though, which is probably for the best. I understand, but trust me, I'm not a fan of staring at my face either. Like, especially like editing this stuff, which is why topic, different time. So yeah, this channel won't be heavily edited, but I promise to keep it unpredictable, and also the content will still be there. I don't want to waste anyone's time ever. So it's going to be still well researched. It's just more so of kind of things I'm trying to connect dots to in a longer form and try to synthesize through talking about it in this kind of like more open discussion that's a little less filtered, I guess you could say. And also, I'll probably be doing some of these, and I'll only post them if I think there's some value in my word vomit. So chances are, if you're listening to this, at some point in this episode, I found value in what I said. I hope you do too. If not, no harm done. I get it. It's not for everyone. Blah blah blah, all that stuff. But yeah, I do value my little word vomit, and I need your attention. Seriously, it keeps my fragile sense of sanity intact. But hey, this is also my little art project because I think of it as kind of throwing up on a canvas. But anyway, welcome again, and fair warning, both of my channels will involve a lot of asserting and throwing ideas out there. And this one in particular, this type of channel, I'm just going to just be saying many things, connecting dots. So this one will have more of the kind of off the cuff thoughts where you might think, is that even true? Is that even true, man? And that's good, because you should question that, because it might not be true. You should question it. I'm hoping to kind of connect these thoughts to a bigger things that either I want to dive into or hope smarter people will pick apart and destroy. And basically what I'm trying to say is you should challenge everything I say. That's how we both stay alive, I think, is the little challenging stuff going on. It's how we evolve and change, blah, blah, blah. And kind of awaken to the world around us. Plus, I think it lets us love and hate each other at the same time, which is kind of the whole point, for real. And that brings me kind of to my conclusion, sort of, or my one-sentence description for this episode. I want you to love and hate the things I say. I want this to be about you and about me and about the weird little relationship we have with everything outside of us, which is also part of us. So stick around and see how I connect all of this, the me, you, us, to some kind of we in the end, hopefully. I don't know, whatever. I don't even know if I like how that sounds, but whatever that even means. Okay, so the last part kind of felt dumb, but I'll probably leave it in because this is unedited. This is sporadic, and this is what we want. So anyway, I needed a space to talk about my research essays and all the kind of random topics that don't quite fit into my main channel cohesively yet. Also, my brain is too scattered to put out perfectly polished videos consistently, but I want an outlet where I can keep positing so I can take my time with the more refined stuff. And that's what this channel is for. Plus, the marketing gods, they whisper that I need to post consistently. So here's my attempt, aligned with the chaos that is my brain. It's my way of doing it. Now, I'm not a big creator on YouTube yet, anyway, but if you are listening on the podcast side of things, hang tight. We are entering the labyrinth right now, I promise. And pod listeners, you'll get the same full experience, as will the Substack crew. Y'all have been the kind of longest, I hate the word, not fan, longest consumers. That fits today. Consumers of my stuff. I appreciate that. Oh, and also subscribe to both channels. It means a lot. And I'll think of you every day I'm alive. Like, seriously, like some part of my brain is always seeking your validation. So I am actually always literally thinking about you because I can't help myself. Just can't help it. So I've been grappling with some cultural and societal concerns lately. Kind of broad stuff, I know, while reading and listening to content I enjoy. And I realized something. I realized there's something missing in a lot of the kind of the theory space. It feels like we've lost the willingness to take risks in some sense. And I think specifically the risk of doing more positing and asserting about our current context. And don't get me wrong, there's plenty of like great cultural analysis and essays out there. That's not It's not what I'm saying where it's like there's no one doing this, blah blah. Oh, I'm just so unique. I'm definitely not doing that. Not doing that. But especially on YouTube. But there's like there's podcasts and blogs. But when it comes to taking psychological, philosophical, or historical theory and applying it to what's happening right now, it feels like that part might be lacking a bit. And I might be way off base here, and this is why it's on this second channel. This is one of those thoughts I'm not attached to, so feel free to call me a little silly goose. But if you think I'm way off, it just feels like we're kind of like stuck in an endless loop of historical analysis. That's the feeling I'm getting. Now, like I said, don't get me wrong. Understanding history, political history, philosophical history, it's crucial. And some might even be able to argue we need more of it. But I'm also a big fan of it. But there is like something about this where some of the most important, and I do think like the historical analysis stuff is some of the most important content being made. But there's something there where we do need to grasp the roots of ideas to understand how we got to the present. But I think there's a tendency for a lot of people to get so caught up in the why, and how of history that we kind of miss out on what it means for the future, that part of it. And this is where I'm getting this kind of feeling as though we've become kind of curators of a intellectual museum rather than kind of architects of new possibilities and potentialities. It's as though we're not internalizing the things we are observing in our constructed museum we've made of intellectual history. It's as though we are like kind of placing these ideas and these thinkers even at a distance from ourselves and our current context, like it's out there more so. Like we have not fully come to terms with how our current power structures are constructing our desires, for example. If you, like me, believe we are living through, let's say, a time where we struggle to imagine possible futures, then you might see why I'm kind of like craving more of this kind of forward-looking analysis. History's context is essential. Sure, right? It's like the Hegelian project of constructing an absolute history to make sense of our current truths. But the thing I keep coming back to and wondering, am I the only one who feels like much of this kind of theory space is like an intellectual time capsule, and we're kind of missing the message, like as though it's just like not penetrating what they're saying. I feel like I'm missing something here, And meanwhile, I think like many people who are willing to do the kind of positing and asserting I'm talking about often don't have, a deep understanding of the theories they reference and end up kind of with a shallow, poorly constructed takes. And some people listening to this might think of me as the same way. And that's fine. I totally get it. Like, that's fine. And you should. And you should comment that I'm a dumb. But anyway, I know I'm being pretty vague about this, but I promise I'm going to synthesize. I'm going to bring in examples to give it some context. But I think part of the issue is that people get too focused on, I think, achieving some sort of end goal in their political or historical analysis. Like they're aiming for like some destination where everything suddenly makes sense. But I think that assumes there's kind of like this endpoint to all of this. It's a way of thinking that's too narrow, too linear, like a vertical stack of knowledge that gets progressively narrower. It has its place, but what I'm trying to explore is more lateral thinking, building connections across fields, perspectives, opinions, and disciplines. And basically, I want fewer historical librarians who brand themselves as cultural analysts and more of those who aren't afraid to kind of get a little wild with their thinking. More chaotic minds, if you will. And yeah, maybe this is all just a phase. It's not a phase, but it could be a phase. My unformulated channel thoughts. But here's a twist I'm playing with, and I hope you bear with me. And if not, that's fine. But I think a big part of this is that we are pressured into predictability. That's what the algorithm craves, right? We all kind of know this at some level. And there's this kind of constant push to be recognizable, to have a consistent in-group vibe with shared words, memes, and ways of thinking. We end up as walking catalogs of predictable belief systems. It's kind of terrifying when you really step back and think about it. I even question myself as I talk. Like are people reading my Substack, for example, thinking, "Oh, here he goes again. The same line." Blah, blah, blah. And honestly, some of you probably like the predictability. It's validating to know what's coming next, right? Like what words I'm about to say, what opinion I'm about to express, what thing about you I'm about to evaluate. But here's the thing. I think part of the point of being into theory, being a true theory nerd, is being willing to smash those ideas into the messy, weird, unpredictable reality we live in. The real world, the external. Get out of the digital. We need less of that kind of Reddit energy and the purist energy, and more of something else. I don't know what that is really. It's just something else. And I try to think of a comparison, but I've kind of failed. But to sum it up, it feels like there's like a lot of people endlessly rehashing the history of, let's say, for example, Marxism or leftism, or arguing about Deleuze and explaining why someone else got him wrong, all while tethering everything back to history. And yeah, in a way, that's what like phenomenology is all about. All that stuff. It's important. Like I said, it's important. And I know some of you are thinking, of a million counterpoints of everything I'm saying right now, and I want you to. And I'll probably agree with you on some of them or a lot of them. But one reason we are struggling, I think, to imagine new futures or to change people's minds or to make things matter again is because we've become too comfortable with the status quo. A status quo that treats, I'd say, like the great minds of the past like exhibits in a museum rather than launching pads for new ideas and a new idea and a way of operating, a way of action, political action, philosophical action, a way to think about yourself, a way to think about the world. All these things, all these connections, right? There are pressures to conform to this. I know this is what the algorithms want you to conform to, that predictability. That's what it wants. Trust me. Maybe there'll be like 3 views on this. And honestly, that's kind of what I want. In a way, it's going to validate my point. And I'm also kind of just tired of it, okay? Like it's a letter to the content creators I consume over. Let's go broader. And for some of you, this might start to sound familiar. Take Stoicism. This critique will be familiar, I promise. For example, though, it's having a major cultural moment, or still is, because it's been happening for a while. But maybe the most well-known philosophical school of thought out there right now, probably more than even, existentialism, is Stoicism. It's everywhere. Your podcast feed, self-help books. It's become $1 billion industry. Seriously, like you've got a former corporate sales guy as its new poster child. And it's turned into the pop psychology and self-help machine that keeps people hyper-focused on themselves. But what's missing is that next step. something that helps people move beyond the self-help focus, beyond consuming themselves to maintain themselves. And with Stoicism, it's become this kind of life hack, a philosophical Swiss Army knife for life's emotional messes. But in the process, it's been reduced to just focused on yourself and things will work out. But what about the external pressures that drive that intense self-focus? What about the systems and conditions that create the need for, say, this strong sense of self-preservation and the way we conceptualize that sense of self-preservation? And what we do is we chase products instead of ideas for change. And in the vast digital space we all inhabit now, we've let complexity get bulldozed into simple memes. It's still a kind of historical consumption. But now it's in this kind of watered down form that doesn't encourage us to envision anything new. It's predictable. It's data. So now we are consuming these shallow versions of ideologies, aesthetics, and psychology, not to understand our place in a broader context, but to validate the views we already hold. That's what's so scary to me. In the case of Stoicism, it often just kind of reinforces an idealized, version of the self. You consume the product, trying to become a better version of yourself, but that product doesn't want you to question where that version of yourself even comes from. Because questioning it might make the future uncertain. If you question that thing, that foundation. So just as history has its gaps and subjective layers, so do we. Our understanding of ourselves has unavoidable blind spots. And I think it's this recognition of gaps within that should make us more aware of the gaps outside of us. And as I'm saying all of this, I realize there's a counterpoint I need to address to myself. I've been arguing that we need to move beyond purely historical analysis and engage more with the present, blah, 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 and bring those ideas into the current context to resolve issues that we're facing now. But I get it. When people try to apply theory to the current context, they can really miss the mark, like fundamentally. Take figures like Ben Shapiro or Jordan Peterson. Yeah, I know. And I know, predictable choices of names to analyze. But they love to dive into cultural debates about woke culture, cancel culture, or the erosion of traditional family values using a kind of pseudo-historical lens. They'll bring up a misinterpreted version of Jung or Nietzsche, pepper in some buzzwords about the woke mob, and then they'll just call that analysis. And I'll probably cover them more in depth one day, but for now, let's just say they cherry pick the philosophical concepts that fit their narrative. And I think that's kind of clear to some level, without engaging with the real complexity of these ideas or those ideas. And take Shapiro, for example. He often references the Enlightenment as his kind of, or as this kind of golden era of individual rights to critique modern woke ideologies as collectivist or communist. But here's the fundamental problem. The Enlightenment wasn't some monolithic endorsement of individualism. It was a time of intense intellectual diversity with thinkers who disagreed about pretty much everything. Like everything, anything and everything. It was throwing paint on canvas, and arguing with each other and debating each other and writing each other. It was this kind of there's like this balance between individual and communal rights. And I think reducing it to a single narrative is not only an oversimplification, it's a distortion. And yeah, of course I'm biased, but that's part of my point. Many ideologically driven creators treat history kind of like this myth, a simplified story that just props up their arguments rather than a nuanced, complex narrative. It's a form of commodification. And I think people crave that predictability within that commodification of that history. They want to hear the history they already heard. So figures like Shapiro, Peterson, even Hassan Piker on the left, no one's safe, are kind of boxed in by what their audiences expect. Once you gather an audience, the algorithm pushes people to that, and now the things you say and what you commentate on, you become predictable. It's expected of you. And to stay profitable, they have to maintain the predictable, even when critiquing the systems, that force those constraints on them. This creates a system of self-scrutiny that social media and our digital spaces demands. So where every thought and opinion is subject to judgment by a global audience, this desire for said audience to appease a crowd or certain crowd, this brings with it a self-disciplining that keeps people from stepping outside the predictable, outside of predictable norms and patterns of thoughts. So those patterns of thoughts that many creators establish for themselves, in the case of Stoicism, let's go back to that, let's use that example, the philosophy has been transformed into a self-help brand that aligns with the logic of neoliberal self-optimization. It encourages people to become entrepreneurs of themselves. Then it's constantly managing their inner states to become more resilient, more productive, more calm under pressure. All traits that are valuable in a capitalistic workforce. But that doesn't necessarily challenge, in that space, challenge systemic injustices. And I want to loop this back to the Enlightenment. To connect the dots, you can find pro-capitalist sentiment in the writings of folks like Kant and Hegel and Rousseau, and I think, and obviously definitely like Locke and Adam Smith. Adam Smith being like the main guy. But this is also when modern capitalism was forming. So I'm trying to think of it. Think of an example like East India Trading Company. East India Trading Company, yeah. Like with the merchants and global power, they redefined authority in many ways. And the point is, they were replacing the divine right of kings with an individual-centered view. And this didn't necessarily mean making everything certain again. In many ways, it positioned this closed off of imagining new futures, by replacing the divine right of kings with individual rights, it didn't suddenly create clarity of mind. It just reshaped the uncertainties with new gods, with new formulations, with new structures, with new ideals. It's like the Zizek point about ideology. We are living in a time where ideology masks itself as non-ideological, pretending that everything is rational when it's anything but. Just how often do you hear the idea that someone's position is right because it's common sense? Many perspectives rely on this kind of too often, to understand, and I think to understand uncertainty, we have to acknowledge the interconnectedness of everything, the way our lives are shaped by countless interactions, trying to universalize everything, to make it all fit into neat, pretty little boxes, is I think a big part of why we struggle with crafting shared narratives. Nothing is static. Nothing stays the same. It's fluid. And I think we need to accept that uncertainty is a feature, not a bug, of thinking deeply about the present. The idea of an achieved endpoint. Maybe we need to internalize that. That might be the great lie that we wish to be true, but it's not. Okay, but let's talk about Jordan Peterson for a second. We often, he often references big names like Nietzsche and Jung and Dostoevsky to frame discussions around traditional values and meaning, right? And part of this appeal is his ability to draw from those intellectual heavyweights. That's the appeal, right? Using their ideas on chaos, order, and the heroic individual and the archetypes. But his interpretations tend to flatten out the complexity of these thinkers, I think, and flatten them out that he brings to the table. So I've been mulling over the idea of doing a longer video on this. So the short version, though, is this. Peterson loves to talk about things like the death of God and the dangers of nihilism. But in a strange way, he embodies the very danger of nihilism. He warns against like that danger. And here's what I mean. Peterson is himself uncertain about the values he's trying to uphold. But he's determined to universalize them, to build them into a rigid, monolithic structure. He's trying to safeguard those values as if they are unquestionable. But Nietzsche's whole project, seemed more about reformulating values, taking the unformulated and making it formulated. What this channel is trying to do. So acknowledging that after the Enlightenment, there's this void left by the absence of absolute authority. Acknowledging that. That's true. That's real. And Nietzsche wasn't simply challenging the old structures. He was saying that the challenge already happened. Pandora's box is open, and we're not going to close it again. We're not going back. And I mean, just take Peterson's example. He has this emphasis on how modern society places responsibility on individuals to navigate their own distress, often ignoring the broader kind of societal forces that shape it. And Peterson's advice to clean your room, for example, and master one's personal chaos aligns with this individualistic focus. But, there's always a but. But it often, I think, avoids the potential deeper question of why do people feel so chaotic and disoriented in the first place? Also right now. So by focusing on the kind of self without addressing the systemic conditions that creates that self, that creates that perception, that creates that identity, that produces those struggles with that identity, I think Peterson sidesteps the kind of radical reimagining that I'd argue Nietzsche is arguing for and was calling for. It's a form of nihilism that a lot of modern kind of Protestants, I don't think, haven't fully reckoned with since breaking away from the Catholic Church. There's this deep historical and contemporary tension between wanting to restore order and recognizing that the foundation, it's already gone. And this is true not just for the right, but also for the neoliberal left. And the neoliberal left, if you're wondering if you're in it, well, just see how you feel when I say some of this stuff, But let's target the neoliberal left, but also both sides. So both sides are clinging to kind of a narrative of a return to order, return to structure. But Nietzsche's point was that the old order is over. The Pandora's box is empty. The real question now is, what do we share relationally that can help us understand our perceptions of order and chaos? That's where the symbols matter. That's where someone like Jordan Peterson, I think, is onto something, but misses the mark because he fixates on algorithms and big money. But let me put it another way. I don't want to get too sidetracked there, even though this is literally a podcast for getting sidetracked, but not too sidetracked. My point is, who's the daddy defining your sense of order and chaos? That's what you or we, me too, me included, should be asking. Part of my point, or at least one of my points, is that both Ben Shapiro and Peterson show the dangers of taking complex historical ideas and repackaging them for a more modern audience without fully engaging with their original context. They have these incentive structures that keep them from ever acknowledging where their interpretations might be. Where their interpretation might be a little off. You know what I'm saying? And honestly, I'm not sure if I fully get what I'm saying, but my point is that you shouldn't just accept my framing either. Even if I think we have some messed up incentive structures in our society, the process of calling them out comes with its own compromises and system of doing that and system of bringing attention to it. I'm doing my best not to become intellectual fast food. Some might be listening to this and be like, oh, I've heard this before. And intellectual fast food is what you are, boy. You might be right. I might agree with you. I hope someday I do agree with you, because that means something within me changed, right? Though admittedly, that would be pretty American of me. I want to be digestible, but not easily digestible. I want to posit ideas without being overly certain about them, right? I want to share thoughts I believe I'm onto without pretending I have everything figured out. So if I ever come across an authority, you should challenge that, including me, including your authorities in your life, maybe even try to tear it down. Maybe. Not always, but maybe, sometimes. But anyway, I hope I'm building something here for you, but I'm still trying to figure out if it's building anything for me. So this is definitely unformulated territory, but let's talk a little bit about how we've come to see the individual and the identity, how the concept of the individual morphed into a kind of divine individual with its own personal morality. Let's do some framing, because we're quick to turn every issue into a matter of individual morality and judging people based on how closely their personal values match certain social ideals. But what if we ask bigger questions? Like, where does morality even come from? Okay. I know that's not exactly a groundbreaking question, obviously, but let's try to dig deeper. What systems actually shape the drive these moral values? That's getting closer, I think, to the essence of what I'm trying to say. But it's still not quite there, I don't think. Now, keep this in mind. So the idea of the divine individual, and let's say if you're a Protestant, you might have this in you unconsciously, maybe even amplified. But I'll explain on that someday, maybe. But now let's look at political fanaticism, right? We often fixate on the loudest voices. That's what we do. I mean, that's how we have someone like Trump running for president. He's the loud voice, right? And the diehard Trump supporters on the, let's say, far right, or the dedicated neoliberal defenders on the left, like they frame themselves as somehow morally unique or deviant, right? And sure, Trump supporters can be more brash in their fanaticism, but the neoliberal left has its own more polished fanatics and framing of this moral question. They're frame themselves as like the good fanatics, for example, and absolutely convinced of their moral correctness, yet often blind to the systems that shape their views. So I'm talking directly to you, the managerial class, and both sides see the other as the more transgressive, but it's become clear that the right has embraced being reactionary, and they see themselves as kind of this counter to progressive order. And Trump, weirdly, I think he embodies this role as a sort of chaotic symbol that's probably worth exploring in its own video. But here's the point I'm trying to make. This focus on individual beliefs and failures of moral character keeps us from dealing with the real issue. that we are all living within systems of shared discontent. Even if we express that discontent in different ways, it's still in a system of discontent and disillusionment. We share that. That is shared. And the underlying system, shaped by, let's say, economic instability, political polarization, and like some sense of constant uncertainty. And that can be existential in nature. And, you look up at the fucking stars and you're like, shit's crazy. But everyone's worldview and political stance, right, is shaped in this way. So, and when I say shaped in this way, shaped in by this disillusionment and discontent. And where their context is. So maybe like someone that feels the discontent in a more urban area, their discontent is going to maybe be more likely be expressed into a left-wing position, say like maybe a left-wing anarchist or a communist. But a more rural person that feels the discontent, it's going to get expressed in a different way, and it happens to be sometimes more right-wing positions. We need to be, I think there's like a connection there that we need to be more mindful of. So when we write off, say, extremists on either end as morally flawed, which, like I said, I'm not defending this point either. I'm not defending their system of morality. I'm more so trying to make the observation of the connections you have with people you even think are morally beneath you in some sense. And that's a bad way to word it. Morally different, maybe I want to phrase it that way. But anyway, I think there's just like this crucial chance to look at the larger forces driving the unrest and dissatisfaction. And yeah, I know that sounds a bit centrist of me, and I'm not defending the status quo, though. And I want to make that clear, because if my position's anything, it's anti-status quo. But I also want to focus on individualism. And the emphasis on the individual is, I think, a product of the neoliberal order itself. It's the engine driving this whole theater that we have. With some people all like libbed up, and others anti-libbed up. But ultimately, we are all on this stage together, often unaware of how we are caught in systems of shared discontent. Our political spectrum is full of people in denial about just how shaped they are by the neoliberal mindset. We are all actors in this ridiculous play. But the stage is hazy of what the stage is. That's clear. And most of us don't realize we are all in this kind of like shared state of unease, unfortunately. And even if our expressions of that discontent look different, this system, driven by your desires, your restlessness, your inability to just be, it all ties back to economic instability, political divides, and general uncertainty. So when we dismiss extremists as mere moral failures, I think we ignore the structures that shape their rage. And honestly, I'm probably willing to stake this point. A lot of this has to do with making us hyper-focused on identity in digital spaces. So we don't look too closely at how power is actually distributed. And yes, that also connects to class consciousness. So the real issue becomes with how we view Trump supporters, for example, is that we see them as uniquely irrational or morally deficient, rather than recognizing their fanaticism as a symptom of a broader systemic disillusionment that touches all of us, just in different forms. And I'm not saying I'm perfect about this, because I have my own snarky comments. I'm definitely not a person that, I literally have a second channel because I can't keep my mouth shut. So Hope that puts it into perspective what I'm trying to say. But we are all disillusioned in our own ways, though, right? So we need to find a way, I think, to collectively understand where that disillusionment comes from. And I think it's there somewhere. I promise. Even billionaires have it, but they're probably not the people you have the most in common with when it comes to that discontent. Just saying. You get me? Feel me? So, but what's this individualistic approach gotten us? Let's look at that. Like, why does this matter, and why should I hate on this individual responsibility? Because obviously, to some extent, that's important. There's like an uncertainty in the spaces in between people. So you need some individual responsibility to maintain a collective awareness. But the hyperfixation on the individual, what does that bring us? And I think that's what we have right now. And I think some level of personal responsibility is necessary, of course, but maybe we've taken it too far. We've made individual responsibility almost sacred, prioritizing it over collective accountability and any real systemic critique. Focusing on the collective would mean looking beyond our self-obsession and beyond just consuming our disillusionment, right? How can you ever destroy the father if you're too busy fighting your brothers and sisters? The authority figure. Okay, that sounded a little cringe, honestly, but I might have a point there. Someone might relate to that. And this mindset is why we've developed, I think, a culture that's more interested in canceling people than questioning the structures that breed moral discontent in the first place. So when we turn social and political issues into individual moral failures, I think we miss the bigger picture. The forces that push people to the extremes. Outrage replaces real analysis, and we end up condemning people without asking what creates them in the first place. We forget what connects us. Okay, so I need to connect this somehow. Let's do some name dropping. Let's circle back the whole shared awareness and moralizing point. I think one of the few kind of contemporary figures who seem to balance this kind of well, I think, is Slavoj Žižek. He doesn't really shy away from the complexities of the past, like I was saying earlier, but he's also not afraid to throw, let's say, like Lacan's psychoanalysis or Deleuze's ideas about desire, into modern politics or pop culture. He makes philosophy alive and relevant again, or feel relevant again. And sure, some people say he kind of oversimplifies complex theories or doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about or doesn't have anything to say, and it's all just jargon, blah, blah, blah. I don't think it's jargon. I found something important in some of the things he had to say, so I think other people will too. But anyway, I think there's something there about the creative process and around ideas and ideologies and so many ideas going on, right? But ideas also aren't meant to be kind of locked away in some academic vault or tower or whatever the analogy you want to use or symbolism you want to use. They're not supposed to be kept away and safe from the public. They're supposed to escape. They're supposed to seep into the cultural bloodstream in different ways. Even if it's not obviously mainstream, they can mess with people's minds and their lives. So it's all about, I think, the project of becoming, of bringing people into an awareness of what's actually shared. What's an actually shared understanding? That the myths we cling to aren't necessarily lies. They're just meant to change over time. And if you feel discontented, I don't know if that's a word, you probably should blame the right people. And it's definitely not the people you should blame the right people, and it's definitely the people, maybe, possibly, with tons of money and power. But you should also not be blaming the people who just, look different than you. they're not why you hate yourself, is what I'm trying to tell you. Anyway, I think Zizek is doing something we kind of need more of. He's applying philosophical ideas in fresh, unexpected contexts. That's what I'm trying to do right here. I'm hoping people click this video, and if they're still listening right now, it's actually kind of crazy. If you're still listening, thank you. But also, why? It's long. This is long of one guy, just one guy trying to keep his brain firing off words. But anyway, that's a real new thinking is happening. But it's not that I agree with everything. Like for example, like Zizek says, I just appreciate his willingness to venture into the unexpected territory that is our current context. And it's risky, because as soon as you step off the well-trodden path, what happens? As soon as you or step off of the path of historical accuracy, you risk being misunderstood, of being oversimplified, or you risk oversimplifying things, which I've been doing this whole episode. I'm doing that. I'm doing that right now. Like, it's inevitable. But honestly, what's more dangerous in my mind is getting a few details wrong, or letting your curiosity and experience right away in some mental museum. If you're too scared to make mistakes, we'll never create anything new. We'll never be able to imagine the new future. We'll never imagine a different future. We'll stay lonely and sad. Okay, well, we'll probably always be a little sad, but at least we can try to be less lonely and maybe less sad. What's the root of this loneliness? I think it's partly the internet's algorithms, which are like a black hole for any depth of understanding of a real sense of self. So if you're still with me, thank you. I'm almost done, I promise. I think. I am. I think. Anyway, everything online gets flattened, reduced to whatever sells or trends. And in that process, the complexity of ideas, any ideas, gets stripped down to the most marketable parts. The algorithms want to break down every fragment so they can repackage and sell it. Even what you're watching right now, it's happening to this. This happens a lot in pop culture. Like imagine if this popped up and got like a bunch of views. Really, it just getting no views and also getting views would prove my point. Because if I don't get views, it means I wasn't able to be captured by some sort of system, which means I probably didn't really say anything. But if I got captured too much, it probably means I oversimplified it too much, and I didn't really say anything. So there's this constant state of trying to find that line in between where the good goods happen, I think. Like I said, I also think this happens a lot in pop culture, where movements like, say, Stoicism, going full circle here, it turned into a bullet point list of like life hacks and memes and some entrepreneur's tool to sell you their dropshipping company. I don't know, are dropshipping companies still being sold to people? Or crypto or something, I don't know. But it's not just Stoicism. Look at how like Deleuze and Guattari's dense ideas about, say, capitalism and schizophrenia and some of the most intricate theories out there, they get watered down into a framework for edgy internet content. That's what many self-proclaimed Marxists and communists are today. Watered down and turned into objects, aesthetics. And I'm not blaming them. They're trying to express their discontent. But they're also clinging to an identity that often keeps them from building a collective awareness, going upwards. If you can't see it, how can you help someone else see it? And capitalism has this kind of eerie knack for taking any countercultural idea and turning it into a commodity. Something else to buy. A nice little package. So counterculture and mainstream culture have practically merged into this kind of thing. The thing. And thanks to the relentless data collection and content algorithms driving the internet, every supposed act of rebellion gets scooped up, repackaged, and sold right back to us. Just to make you, just to ease your discontent just enough, but keep you changing and buying, So capitalism made it so that even critique becomes part of the system. Discontent gets funneled into obscure internet corners where it's safely contained. Obscure meme cultures and fringe content creators, they might rack up millions of followers, convincing their audiences they are somehow, counterculture. But are they really? When you've got more viewers than the mainstream, can you claim to be outside of it? You have redefined mainstream and you are now in it. You are the thing that is driving people's desires. And underneath that drive, what is the structure that's there? It's not your rebellion. And I think this is where Deleuze and Guattari's notion of schizo comes into play. And schizo subjectivity comes in handy as well. Because they describe capitalism as kind of like this machine that endlessly generates desires. It's like an infinite generator, a lot like AI, where it breaks them apart and then reterritorializes them into new forms. You think you are escaping the system, but the system has already accounted for your escape plan. The algorithms are always watching, always recalibrating to capture your discontent and package it right back to you as something consumable, a new conspiracy theory, a new course, a new content creator. Think about it. We don't even have a clear sense of anything anymore on what's mainstream. We use things like legacy media, but what is mainstream? At any moment, anything can become mainstream. And what's counterculture? Because it's all been flattened into the same content stream. The internet has blurred all the lines. Subcultures that used to thrive on opposing the mainstream now thrive within it, while maintaining the illusion that they are outside of it. Take a look at the alpha bro culture. It's a multi-billion-dollar business selling hyper-masculine ideals to men who think they are resisting the weak, feminized mainstream. Then you have girl boss feminism. Let's say the girl boss feminism on the left, because there's a right version of that too. But girl boss feminism on the left. Same thing. But the flavor of corporate empowerment, they mirror each other. When you consider those two things, they mirror each other. They're both trapped in a cycle of hyper individualism that the system, the structure, feeds on. The more they push for self-empowerment, the more fragmented they become, always chasing some ideal version of success that's inherently unattainable. And here's the thing. And here's the both of these cultures, right wing alpha bros and left wing girl bosses, they end up in the same fucking place. They are locked in a capitalist cycle of self-obsession, chasing the next goal, the next achievement, the next upgrade to their personal brand. They're not looking outward at the systems that put them there. Instead, they're stuck staring into a mirror, endlessly trying to optimize themselves. And Baudrillard talks about this. He would call it the simulacrum of empowerment or something like that. Chasing an image of success, whether it's the dominant man or the career-driven woman, that's just a hollow reflection of deeper systemic desires. That's the irony of modern culture. We think we are pushing back against the system, but most of the time, we're just feeding it fuel. It's like getting it into the fire, We're self-obsessed. Our generation is too. Gen Z is even more so than ever. And trust me, I see this in myself too. That's why when I say all this stuff, I'm the problem also. Me. The internet, with its endless streams of content, flattens everything into a spectacle where even rebellion becomes a product. We are chasing identities, but those identities are just commodified images, detached from any real substance. It's like a Lacanian mirror stage. We are obsessed with idealized versions of ourselves that are always out of reach. And capitalism, or capital, or system capital, or whatever, loves that because it keeps us consuming. So in the end, I'm just trying to take a more creative approach to all of this. I'm calling for a kind of more of a recognition of the messy web of connections that stretches out all the time. It's like a web, an unpredictable web. It's a rhizome, ways of reaching into the chaos of our world. And I say let the web flow in a way. We need to understand what we share in that space, in that meta space, Because right now we're in a world of constant information overload, and it makes it hard to see the bigger picture. And I feel like right now I'm concluding my overly fixating on capitalism. But our structure thrives on this fragmentation, I think. It's keeping us laser focused on individual morality, personal success, and surface level critiques. If you agree that the current system thrives on our fragmentation, on keeping us obsessed with our own tiny piece of the puzzle, so we never zoom out and see the larger connections, then we have a problem. If we can't break out of the loop, if we can't acknowledge the shared discontent in the systems that are possibly driving it, then we are doomed to stay in the hollow cycle of self-obsession. We will not be able to imagine new futures. We'll remain discontented. I still don't know if that's a word, but I'm using it in this episode. And we'll keep further fragmenting ourselves and each other. And it's kind of sad, honestly. I don't even have I wanted to think of a snarky joke for this one, but there's something about real rebellion that we miss in our movies. And that's probably an idea I'll flesh out for my other channel, the Tism channel. But think about this. Think about it. Real rebellion is something we cheer for. Your favorite Western, Blade Runner, your favorite superhero flick. It's always about someone realizing they are connected to something larger than themselves. Something beyond the system defining them. Okay? But anyway, I've talked enough for now, I think. Thanks for sticking around, but you got to get out of my labyrinth. I hope enough connections were made. Until next time.